Hi, Rich. Thanks for joining me on the Courage of a Leader podcast today.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to talking. You are boldly and painstakingly building and rebuilding software that's easy to use and provides exceptional value for your customers. To do so requires the courage to be bold and to go for extraordinary. What drives you to be bold and to create the extraordinary?
So, Amy, I have to admit, part of me feels like I'm not bold enough. I look at others and I'm like, oh my gosh, they take such huge leaps forward. But the reality is, I think there's a couple of things that drive me. Number one is people in my life telling me I couldn't do something.
Okay.
So I'll give you a short story. When I was 12, I started my first business. And in one day's time, I turned $300 into over $1,100. And this was back in the early 80s. So that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I used that to buy my car when I turned 16. But I started thinking, oh my gosh, being an entrepreneur is it. I'm going to become a millionaire by age 23. Oh man, so many people said that's not going to happen. And don't set my hopes too high. Don't have my expectations so high, I'll get crushed, things like that. And a lot of people just didn't believe in me for whatever reason. I mean, I was a poor kid. I came from nothing. So what did they have to believe in? Like, how am I going to be the exception to the rule? Well, that angered me internally, not
Yeah.
externally, but internally. And that became a fire that drove me and still to this day kind of drives me. And it's not a pain point. It's just more of like, don't doubt me. I know what I can do.
Yeah.
So
At
that's a
the age
big
of
driver.
12.
Yeah.
Well, those are
um,
amazing results. Day
well,
one.
it's a fun story actually, but yeah, it really impressed upon me that if you give people something they want and it's obvious to them, they'll pay you for it. So I went from having nothing to having money suddenly, and I was just struck with, wow, this is what life should be like. So I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
I'd say the other thing to answer your question, what drives me to be bold is
Yeah.
I like to believe that we can live life the way it could be, not the way it is. And I've always approached my life that way. I'm an optimist by nature. I look forward into the future to say, how can I do something today to make my life better in the future? And it's not that I don't enjoy today too. I love today. I love being in the present, but that helps me look at the world differently and say, what is possible? So challenge me to do the impossible. Tell me I can't do it, and let me see a future that nobody else is seeing. And I get driven by that.
What is it about you, Rich? What personality traits, what drivers have you have that perspective, that looking for what is possible?
So I think there's a couple other answers to that, which actually go very deep too.
Okay.
One is oftentimes in my life, I felt weak, physically weak, maybe emotionally weak. I saw my parents yelling and it made me cry. And I felt like, wow, why can't I hold this back? Financially weak.
Mm,
And I think that drive to not be weak is part of it.
okay.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. The second thing is in college, I was exceptionally poor. There were days I'd wake up on Monday with $5 to my name, and I have to get through the whole week before I got my paycheck. And I had a mentor who said, "Hey, Rich, if you need the money, it'll be there." And that caused me to kind of figure out how to get the money. And so I came up with a methodology, which is the simple premise: for every choice we have to make in life, I presume that there are at least 43 different choices that you can make. Why 43? It's just a big number. It's an odd number. It's sufficiently high to make you dream above yes and no, true and false, black and white.
Okay.
And it's not that there's actually 43. Sometimes it's 100, sometimes it's 12, but it
Yeah.
forces you to look and say, what is actually possible?
Yeah.
Do you like giving blood?
No, no, I don't do well. I have to have the ice on the back of my neck from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, there's companies that will pay for your blood. I
Mm,
didn't do this, by the way. That's just an option I looked at. Like there's plasmapheresis. They will pay for donations of blood or white blood cells, et cetera, in certain circumstances. So that's a way to get the money,
yeah, yeah.
right? It's kind of crazy if you say, how many options could there be? And then you start looking at the world from a bigger perspective. You start to see there are things that other people don't realize that are opportunities.
Yeah.
And therefore, that's how I can see where to drive myself my family, my company, my team, anybody forward.
Yeah, there are at least three things that I want to underscore about what you just told us regarding perspective, Rich, and how we see things. So, first of all, I heard that you were told as a kid, like, you can't be that millionaire by 23 or whatever age you were saying. But then you also had a mentor that said to you, if you need the money will be there. Right. So I'm seeing you choose who am I going to listen to? Right. I'm going to
Right.
choose to have that voice running around in my head, not these other naysayers, right? Who are we're probably trying to protect some young dreamer kid,
Hmm.
right? But you believed it, you knew it. Interesting what you said about that perspective of what is possible and tapping into those times where you felt weak. I think so many of us, when we're not feeling strong, when we're not feeling capable, when we're concerned about things, we don't like to go there. We don't like
Hmm.
to think about that. But gosh, could we have that be a driver? Could we actually look at that situation and be, how do I want to shift this? How do I want to choose to move forward? And there's
I'd
at
like
least 43 different choices in front of us
totally.
for doing so. I love that. I think so many people can get stuck into that. It's A or B thinking.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we're really resourceful and we really move forward in life. Like when plan A is not possible, it doesn't mean you have to resort to this only other option B. There's
Exactly right.
lots in between.
Yeah. I'd love to share one other kind of thought on
Sure.
this, which is my definition and methodology for confidence.
Okay.
Confidence is knowledge of yourself. Now,
Okay.
I say that because think of confidence in context of any kind of situation and then ask yourself, what do you know about yourself in that situation? I'll give you a simple example. You get a
Okay.
flat tire.
Yeah.
Now, if you have no confidence or no knowledge of how to change the tire, how to get help, how do you feel? You're high anxiety, panic, maybe
Yeah.
in tears, the world is ending, etc. But if you
Vulnerable. Yeah.
stop, yeah, but if you stop and say, what do I know about myself right now? And you start thinking about what are the options? Well, do my feet work? I can walk.
Mm.
And in today's world, we have cell phones. So do I have a cell phone? I can call somebody,
Mhm.
right? Do I have a tire iron and a spare tire? Maybe I can try.
Yeah.
But you don't have to lose out to the weakness of uncertainty when you start asking yourself, what do I know about myself in this situation? Because then you can build confidence. And the second thing to this is I love to borrow confidence. And what
Okay.
I say about that is I'm borrowing from the future. And I learned this from skateboarding of all things. Back when I was a teen, I skateboarded all the time. And there were tricks I'd try to learn that were very scary to try to learn.
I'm sure.
And what I would do is I'd imagine, okay, how I feel today with only done the trick once is terrified. How would I feel if I had done it 1,000 times?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how confident would I feel because I know exactly how to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you can borrow that confidence. If you can imagine the feeling of that confidence in the future, then you can instill that feeling right now and use it to your advantage to get through that weak situation or that feeling of weakness by overcoming it with a future confidence.
I love this. What do I know about myself right now? And I like how you're grounding that in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not, oh, the knowledge of the people from YouTube. I have a cell phone and access to YouTube right now. I could watch a video. So, looking at what are my capabilities, my resources in that moment, just taking it from that I perspective boosts the confidence. And I love this.
Yeah.
Like, how am I going to feel? Like, once I do these month end reports 3 months in a row, right? Or after I've done this thing for a couple of weeks, how am I going to feel about it?
Right. Because you're going to feel great.
Yeah.
When you've been doing it for so long and it's second nature, you're like, well, this is easy. I can do this. So
Yes.
try to borrow that. You won't have 100% confidence on day one, but you'll have more than 1%.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this, Rich. Let me pause our conversation here and tell listeners a little bit more about you. Richard Walker is the CEO and co founder of Quik. having started over 10 companies since the age of 12. We've already learned that. And the host of the Customer Wins podcast, author of 2 books, and father to 3 boys. Rich empowers people to do their best work. Prior to starting Quik, Rich was a financial advisor with Financial Network, currently known as Cetera, and a business consultant with Arthur Andersen. He started Quik in 2002 to help people spend less time processing paperwork and more time on what they do best. So glad that we're in this conversation, Rich.
Yeah, me too. I love this type of stuff. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. So, besides telling others some of the things that you've already told us, how do you empower others around you to be bold?
So I think it's about a couple of things. Number one, we were talking about this yesterday with somebody. When you recognize somebody for what they like and what they enjoy,
Yeah.
and I think most people who take a job, for example, are taking a job in a role that they actually like and enjoy. I'm not saying they like every task, and I'm not saying everybody's where they want to be,
Yeah.
but for the most part, you're focused on something that you enjoy. So if you recognize what people enjoy and then you let them do more of it, they're naturally empowered.
Mm-hmm.
So if you remove roadblocks, for example, if you make it part of their job, if you give them more responsibility in that role, in the thing that they like, they will feel empowered to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Second thing I feel is you have to let them fail. And
Mm-hmm.
here's a funny thing, Amy, as an entrepreneur and founder of a company, how many times have I failed? How many times have I let myself fail? I didn't beat myself up. I didn't fire myself. I didn't dock my
Yeah,
pay, right? I didn't have to do whatever punishment people think are going to happen to them. So if I allowed that for me, why can't I allow that for my team members?
yeah.
Right. So I feel like if I enable them to do more and take on more responsibility, I also equally have to enable them to fail, live with that failure, mistake, lesson, et cetera, and grow from it.
Yeah.
Plus, I learned from somebody else. If somebody made $1 million mistake in your company, is that the time to fire them? No, you just paid $1 million for that lesson. Don't lose out.
That's a really good point. That's a that's a really good point.
Now, obviously, make your judgment call. The person may still be an idiot and you don't want them, but that's a different thing.
Yeah.
The third thing I would add to this then is instill vision.
Okay.
And not everybody is a visionary. This is something I've had to learn the hard way. In fact, I used to think everybody wanted to be the CEO of my company. That turns out exactly nobody wants to be the CEO of my company. So I therefore have the role of visionary. And I used to get frustrated, like, why aren't you dreaming about this? Why aren't you coming up with this great idea?
Mhm.
And what I realized is that's not everybody's passion, desire, strength, will, etc.
It's looping us back to the first thing.
Right.
Right.
Go back to what they enjoy.
Enjoy. Yeah.
But what I feel is that if I can give clear vision about what we're doing, if I can articulate a future that could be that we could achieve,
Mhm.
and I show them how they play a vital role in doing that, that they then start to dream a little bit more and they start to look ahead and start asking things. So then I'll give you an example. At the end of 2022, ChatGPT came out and everybody was enamored. So was I. So in early 23 in January, I said to all of my team members, we have 2 goals this year. Number one, you have to find an AI driven tool that makes your life better.
Hmm.
It's something that makes your job easier, faster, higher quality, something. And two, we're going to figure out how to put AI into our software, which is another thing. So here's the outcome. It took a while. It took a while for people to say, I'll try it, I'll do it. I kept showing them my results. And eventually, my forms team came up with a solution to a problem that they've asked me to solve for a decade that I wouldn't solve because it's highly complex to solve.
Okay.
They got what's called robotic process automation. It's a form of AI to do the job for them. They
Oh,
didn't like how many clicks they had to do on the screen. It was this laborious process.
yes.
And now we have a tool that does the entire job that human did for $3 an hour.
Awesome.
It was an amazing outcome. They never dreamt of that without me saying, hey, what's possible? What could we do? So I think you have to instill some sense of vision and direction with your team so that they do want to take bolder steps with you.
Yes, yes. I think that's really important what you said, Rich, about articulating how they play a role. and understanding how what they like and enjoy is going to be leveraged as part of this journey.
Yeah.
That's how I define strengths, by the way. Those things that we're both good at and we passionately enjoy. Because
Hmm.
then when we are getting people's talent and their energy, right, we are getting the very best of them.
Yeah. And this is something I realized back in college. How many people love public speaking? The
Mm,
fear of public speaking is right up there with the highest of fears, right?
yeah.
And I was guilty of that in college. We had a class where we had to do public speaking on video so we could watch ourselves play it back. And my gosh, I couldn't speak. I had the nervous, twill in my voice. I had this twitch. I'd pull up my shirt over and over again.
Ah, ah,
I had all these things and I watched all that. And I asked myself a question. If I really want to be a Fortune 500 CEO one day, what is it going to take? And one of the things I admire about those leaders is their public speaking abilities.
mm,
I said, man, I'm so terrified of public speaking. How do I become good at that? And
yeah.
then I realized something. What you become good at is something that you love. I was good at skateboarding and surfing and snowboarding because I loved it. I enjoyed it.
Okay.
So I said, I need to love public speaking then.
Ooh,
Because if I loved it, I'd want to do it and I'd
yeah.
become good at it because it was something I wanted to do. I faked it till I made it, by the way.
Okay. I was gonna say, how do
No,
we tell us how we love something that we don't love?
I mean, there's ways around that. There are other
Yeah.
ways to do it, but I just took on the brute force mindset of I'm going to tell myself, I'm going to instill a new belief that I love public speaking. And
Mhm,
what happens? So I had to create these thoughts.
mhm,
What happens if you love public speaking? You will accept every opportunity to do public speaking. And so suddenly, if an opportunity was coming up, I was the first to raise my hand. If they were asking me to do something I was very uncomfortable doing, I did it. I mean,
wow.
I've spoken in front of 1,000 people audience because I had the opportunity and I love public speaking.
Yes. Oh, I love it, Rich. You started at belief.
Yes.
I talk about this simple model with leaders all the time that if we want to change our results, how we get to results is actually it starts with our beliefs. What are we thinking and believing about ourselves, about the situation, about the people around us, about what's possible? That leads to our actions.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because, you know, if I'm thinking, oh, they're never going to get it. This is not going to make a difference in the marketplace. We're never going to fit. This is a really complex problem with the
Yeah.
forms, right? We're never going to figure this
Yeah.
out. Then there's a lot of actions I'm not going to take or I'm not going to take powerfully, and that's going to impact the results that we get. So to
Yeah.
be able to tell yourself, I love public speaking. I am going to be I'm gonna be that person that loves public speaking that would lead you to actions you otherwise wouldn't even think of taking.
Right. Yeah. Because you're terrified. Like, oh my gosh, be up on stage with all those lights. And what are people going to think of me? Oh my gosh, am I the right person? Do I know what I'm talking about? All those thoughts, they start to melt away when you have a different set of beliefs. They really
Mhm,
do.
mhm. And that's literally how we change our minds.
Well, actually,
Neural pathways.
yes. And that is the topic of one of my books. My
Love it.
one of my books is my first book. It's called It's My Life. I Can Change If I Want to. And it's built on the premise about beliefs. I wrote this bullseye chart where if you think about the center of the bullseye as a fact, the fact is it's
Okay.
55 degrees, right? You can't change a fact. It's 55 degrees. All the scientific measurements show it's 55 degrees.
Yeah.
What you believe about the fact is the next ring in the bullseye. What you believe about the fact is going to help you interpret how that fact is. So I don't know if you read the story of Shackleton's journey to the South Pole and how he got stranded for 18 months with his crew and everybody survived starving and freezing over an 18-month period.
Okay.
Well, there's a interesting part of that story. They were so cold for so long that when it got to just freezing temperature, when it came up from -20 all the way up to +20 or +30, they were sweating.
Oh my gosh. It's all
They
right.
had to take all their clothes off. They were too hot.
Yeah.
And yet, to you and I, we'd be freezing.
Yeah.
It'd be crazy,
Yes.
but it's still a fact, right? So their belief about that, which of course was physical, but their belief about the temperature
Hmm.
was interpreted differently than your and my belief about that temperature. Even though it's still the same temperature, it's still an immutable fact.
Yes.
But then this drives to something else. if you have beliefs interpreting facts, those are what drive your thoughts. The
Hmm.
thought of I'm cold or I'm hot, the thought of I'm scared or I'm confident.
And how we feel about it.
Yes, yes. And those thoughts, so here's the thing. A lot of people think they have to change their beliefs by changing their thoughts. I say it's the opposite. Change the belief, which
Hmm.
will fuel the thoughts, and then you will remove the tape loops, the incessant dragons in your head telling you the wrong things. They're telling you the wrong things because they're coming from the beliefs.
Yeah.
Change the beliefs and they'll stop telling you those things.
Yeah.
And then the outer ring in this bullseye is reality, meaning how you perceive the world. And
Okay.
how you go through the world is filtering facts through your beliefs, which emanate the thoughts in your head and how you articulate yourself. And therefore, I love how you said it, the actions you end up taking.
So we will get the link to your book in the show notes. Yeah, I am not a neuroscientist, but I am really fascinated by how our brains work and that we can literally change our minds, literally change these loops that are going on inside of our heads. And beliefs are the linchpin. I really
Yeah.
believe
And being in software development, I was a software programmer for part of my career. I really think of it as reprogramming your mind
it.
because you're just giving it a different instruction set to work from. And your
Yeah,
mind, there's a crazy aspect of your brain. If you ask it a question, it will give you an answer.
yeah.
Doesn't matter if the answer is right or wrong, it will give you an answer. And so I thought, how do I use that?
Nice. Oh, what a perfect metaphor for you. All right. How can leaders know, Rich, if they and their teams are being bold enough?
I, I, I don't know. Because again, I started by saying, I don't think we're being bold enough. I believe that you have to look at your progress. I heard this really great quote. You've already achieved a whole bunch of goals that you set out for yourself. So why aren't you happy? And it just reminds me to say, wow, look back at where you came from.
Mhm.
Look back at what you've done and measure it and ask yourself, what are you doing? We are the most successful we've ever been in our company. And yet I can say, wow, we're not growing fast enough. We're not building enough profit. We're not, adding enough sales or people to the team or whatever. But man, if I look backwards, we've come a long, long way.
Yeah.
So I would say that's really the biggest measurement is understand where you are, accept it, look at it, have gratitude for it, but then challenge yourself. What are the opportunities in front of you? So I mentioned that in 23, we said, let's build a product with AI.
Yep.
We got the product out in less than a year. It went into production in November. And this is the crazy thing to me. I've told entrepreneurs this that your first idea is not your best idea. It's just the one that got you started. It took me 21 years to come up with the best idea we've ever had for our company. And our new product, Form Extract, is going to completely transform how we can help our customers, how many more customers we can serve, and really the impact we have, which of course is going to lead to our growth and the evolution of our own company. So that's a bold thing too, because we took something we had never done and went after it and built the product with a partner and brought it to market. And here we are.
Yeah. I love that. I also love that you started your answer to this question about how do we know if we're being bold enough by inviting us to look back. Because I think that's a bit counterintuitive. People might think, "Oh, are we being bold enough? We got to look ahead. We got to make that vision larger and more audacious." Yet, if we look back at what we've accomplished, and I think this is a pitfall and often leads to imposter syndrome, right? Where, I mean, we're always
Mm-hmm.
looking at the gap in front of us rather than the gap that we've closed behind us. But if we look at that, and I love how you said, measure it, right? And really know this is what we've done, this is what we've accomplished to date. Gosh, that builds the confidence, that builds the belief, and now you're standing on that as you're
Yeah.
looking forward, and of course then challenging yourself, right? What do we want to do? And I love your challenge for the teams. Make your own lives easier.
Yeah.
Right.
So, Amy, what's really interesting about your question about how do we know if we're being bold enough is inside that question is a self judgment.
Mm.
It's a question of, am I good enough? Am I doing enough? Am I achieving enough? Right. And I'm not saying it's a bad judgment, but it is a judgment nonetheless. And
Mhm.
anytime I'm going to judge myself, I'm going to judge it on the past as well as the present, as well as what I think I can do in the future,
Love
and
it.
not just on the future, because it's so easy to think I don't have enough and live in a scarcity mentality across all people at all stages of life and all stages of income. The average person just wants to make 10% more and
Hmm.
their life would be better.
Hmm.
So whether you're making a million a year, 10 million a year, 100,000 a year, 10,000 a year, 10% more on average for everybody would make their lives better. Wait a minute here. Didn't you say if you made 100,000 you'd be happy? Didn't you say if you made a quarter million you'd be happy? You still need 10% more. So I that's just a natural thing I think is the self-judgment has to come with looking at where you came from so that you don't go down the deep end of negativity and lose out on what you have right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And constantly living in, I'm not enough. I need more.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's say one of our listeners is a mid-level leader. They've got a
Mm-hmm.
team of five or eight. What's one practice or habit that you would suggest for them to foster boldness and going for it inside of the team?
Fundamentally, you have to give them the space to do it. You
Mm.
have to allow for it. I'll share another belief of mine. If somebody else is stressed out about something, I don't have to be.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so if I have a team and their job is to do something and be stressed for it, I won't have to be. Which, if I am, that leads to micromanagement. Oh, did you get that done? Was it done right?
Mhm.
Instead, just let them do it, empower them to do their best work and trust that they're going to do their best work. Measure that too and
Yeah,
see if it's working or not.
yeah.
So, it's easy. Like we have a very, very high level of customer service expectation. Like get back to people in the same day, if not the same hour, solve it in one click or one message, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And when things start to drag on and a customer's pinging us saying, "Hey, I'm not getting this answer," and they escalate it, it's easy for us to think as leaders, "Oh my gosh, my team's not performing." And then we come to find out the answer is really complex.
Mm.
And what the person was doing is putting together a very thorough answer with examples and screenshots and details and links to articles. And so, if you're empowering someone to do their best work, you have to look at the whole picture and give them the space to do it. And if it's not meeting certain parameters, needs, metrics, however you look at running your business, then bring that to them and say, "Hey, how could we do this faster?" It might just be they're overwhelmed and need more help. It might be that they didn't prioritize as well. Who knows? But I think you got to give your team the space to succeed and fail if you want them to actually be bold. Because what do most people care about with their job? Not losing it.
Yeah.
So you got to take that fear away from them.
Yeah.
Oh man, well, I won't name names, but one of my team members came to us, and I kind of think of it as they came from an environment where they were punished. And
Mm.
so they expect that to happen in this environment. And so, of course, they're apologetic when something happens and they feel terrible and they're super stressed. And I've had to say, climb off the ledge.
Yeah, yeah.
We didn't destroy the company. We didn't harm a customer. Nobody's going to jail. You learned something from this. Let's see if we can do something to make it so we don't have to do this again. But guess what? I'm not angry. You're not in trouble.
Yeah.
And it probably took a solid year, year and a half for that person to overcome those fears and those traumas, let's say, from a past workplace. And
Mhm.
that took me giving them the space to do it. And now the outcome, having been here for a couple of years, now the outcome is that person is taking bigger leaps forward. They're taking on more responsibility without asking me. They're
Mhm.
doing things to improve our company because they know it's the right thing to do and they know they can take the risk to try it. And it's not that they do it in a vacuum. They come, we talk about it, et cetera, but I no longer have to suggest it.
Yeah.
They're thinking for themselves.
Nice. Nice. And I would venture to guess that that is due to a substantial shift in beliefs for many
Absolutely.
individuals. Yeah.
Absolutely. Right.
I also want to double click on the first thing that you said when I asked, what's the one practice to foster boldness? That giving the space for them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I'm hearing to define how they're going to do it. It loops back to the second thing that you said when I asked, how do we empower others to be bold? Let them fail.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Too often that leaders will delegate something and then, oh, it's getting close to the deadline, or this is not quite going the way that I envisioned it, and then we scramble to take it back.
Yeah.
Um, that mindset, I'm thinking how that can transform things for me. That when I delegate this, I don't have to be stressed about it
Yeah.
anymore. And I find that, Rich, I either play on one or the other side of the continuum. Like sometimes I will delegate something and I will completely forget. It will just go out of my mind, right? Like
Hmm.
that is with them now, and I forget about it. But other times I'll delegate it and like I'm still thinking about it, right? And it makes me want to poke at it rather than just telling myself you've delegated the thinking and the worrying and the stress around this to someone else.
Yeah.
That's like the most empowering thing for everybody in the situation.
Yeah. It's empowering for yourself. And I'm going to give you one of the hardest examples to do this with. And we faced this so many times in our history. Thankfully, not for the last several years. Amy, I can't tell you how many times we didn't know how to make payroll.
Okay.
Yeah, how stressful is that? You can't
Yeah.
pay your team. You can't pay yourself.
Yeah.
I am very grateful to have a COO on my team, a partner in my company, whose job was to figure that out.
Mm,
So because it was his job to figure it out, even if he told me, "Hey, we're going to figure out how to pay payroll this week," I had no stress about it
wow.
because my belief is he's stressed about it. He will figure it out. He'll ask for my input. And yeah, sometimes we took out more home equity line, to go borrow to do it. Sometimes it was, okay, I will just go without a paycheck for the fourth paycheck in a row.
Mhm.
Whatever it is, I'll go borrow against credit cards. We figured it out. But the point is, I didn't create stress in myself. I didn't create worry in myself, which what value would that bring? If
Yeah.
I'm not personally working on the solution, there's no sense in me having the stress about that problem because that takes me away from everything else I have to do. And what's the best way to solve the revenue problem? Go make more revenue. Right. So if I take on all the stress of how do I pay the bill that is due versus how do I just go build the company more, I won't get to go build the company more.
Yeah.
So it's very empowering for yourself to have that kind of belief that if somebody else is worried about it, you don't have to be.
Okay, this is interesting, Rich. As I was listening to you, I was like, okay, like rationally, I get that. That would be great, right? I'm giving that concern to somebody else, but I care about the people that work at this company, right? Like, how do I switch that off? But then when you said, what can you influence? What's the most important thing for you to focus on in the moment? Then I thought, okay, I can't control this thing, right? Or that's already been delegated to somebody else. If I can focus my time and my attention and my energy on the thing that is going to be useful long term, then I could maybe get closer to bringing that dimmer switch all the way down on the other
Yeah.
concern.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not saying that you won't feel stress at some point, like, oh,
Yeah,
rubber
yeah,
meets road. We got to actually solve it today. We got to put money in the bank somehow.
yeah,
But there's amazing things that happen. So this comes back to that belief I got from my mentor. If I need the money, it will be there,
yeah.
which has led me to find ways to get money I never thought about before.
Mhm.
And it could be luck, like suddenly a credit card transaction from a big customer comes through. That's happened before.
Yep, yep,
Sometimes it's punishment, like I just can't pay this vendor. They're going to have to suffer for an extra week or something. I hate doing that,
yeah.
but there are levers in your business to move money around and figure it out, as well as in your personal life. So therefore, you'll figure it out. And if you know you can figure something out, you have confidence of yourself, therefore, or knowledge of yourself, therefore you have confidence, which I'll share one other thing. It leads to my definition of what is mental strength.
Okay.
Mental strength is defined by the conversation you have with yourself at a hard time, in a difficult moment.
Okay.
What
Yeah.
are you telling yourself about that flat tire? My life is ruined.
Yeah.
This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Or are
Always
you saying to
happens to me.
yourself,
Yeah.
yeah, or are you saying to yourself, I'll get through this. I'll find a way. I have methods.
I've solved other problems.
Yeah. So that idea of mental strength is defined by how you talk to yourself during these hard times. And that's also part of this. So going back to your question of how do I actually feel through these times? It's one thing to say it, but to actually feel it differently. It all comes back to these beliefs, and it's a layering of multiple beliefs for me
Yes.
that help put me in a position of feeling like, yeah, I really am not going to stress about this.
Many of us have heard the phrase culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Hmm.
Peter Drucker has made that one popular. I have said belief eats behavior. for breakfast. And everything
Nice.
that you have said today is making that point that, often I think there's too much emphasis placed on mechanically, robotically getting all these behaviors right as
Yeah.
leaders, right? And but nearly everything you said today pointed to grounding ourselves in a strong, personal, and empowering belief and operating from there. And we can build those beliefs off of facts. We can build those beliefs off of evidence of what we've accomplished in the past. And we can also build them off of what's possible in the
Hmm.
future. How
Yeah.
I'm going to feel when I've been doing this for 3 months.
Right. Exactly. So it's very much you need to be versus do.
Mm,
The doing can help you be
mm.
that thing, but being is believing. And then you actually naturally do the behavior. I love how you've looked at that. So yeah, beliefs eats behavior. I love it.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and from your experience with us, Rich, today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Amy. I really hope that I've helped somebody and inspired them in some way. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
I'm sure you have. You've inspired me.